Hello and welcome to Dawn Chorus Writes, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction and audio fiction. This is a very special one-shot, and it is a collaboration between myself and Jheqia, and it is a fundraiser for the Pakistan flood appeal. So 100% of the money that you either beautifully donated or the ad money, 100% of all the ad money for this one shot will be donated towards the flood appeal. So I hope you can support. It's affecting millions of people across Pakistan. It's costing thousands of lives, this disaster, and there's an urgent appeal for food, medical supplies, shelters, and access to safe drinking water. So I know money is tight at the moment. It's heartbreaking how money is at the moment, but even if you can't donate actual money, like I said, 100%, there'll be more ads through this video than normally is, but just if you can run as many ads as possible. I know sometimes you might skip through them, and they do my head in after a while too, but if you can run as many as possible, 100% of the ad money will be donated to the funds. So that is your way of doing it. And even if it's 10p or £1 or £100 or £1,000, every penny counts. Every penny adds up. We are all in this together, and it's supporting one another. So with that in mind, a massive shout out to Art. He is an amazing artist. He is under as Art the F Up on Instagram, and all of his information will be linked down below. Make sure you go and send him some love, because he donated all of his amazing skills and time for free to create this beautiful thumbnail that basically describes a scene that happens in the story. So he's done it amazingly. It's just, yeah. So make sure you go and send him some love. Make sure you send Jheqia some love, because literally I wouldn't have been able to pull this off without her. It is a true collaboration between the both of us, and it is epic long because of it. So make sure you send her some love. All her information is listed down below. Make sure you send me some love by smashing that like button. Comment down below what you think of this one shot. Either it's just sending out positive thoughts and vibes for the people it's affected, or the story that's involved, or anything like that. Just kind words down below, please. And make sure you share this one shot, because the more people that watch it and run the ads, the more money we can raise. So if you know anyone who likes Miraculous Ladybug, Audiofic, or even if they haven't, then just share it to them. You never know, they might like it. And make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on other one-shots and other series that are happening at the moment. And I hope you become part of the community that we are building here. And on that note, I hope you enjoy. Make sure you sit back and get comfy, because this is a long one. All in this together. Adrien's POV. Adrien's sabre ran across the opponent's padded jacket with a quick flicking motion. At the same time, the green light flashed on his side. Action, attack, point. The English referee shouted across the hall for all the supporters to hear, seated in their plastic chairs, erupting in a wave of applause. He had won another gold medal after hours. Days of training to the point of exhaustion. So why wasn't he happy? Why was there this hollow feeling inside of him? The joy he once had for this sport had somehow disappeared one day, and it hadn't sunk in until the second. Why was he still doing this? He pulled off his helmet and accepted the towel that was held out to him from a junior member of his team, smearing the pools of sweat from his face and the fringe of his hair. Congratulations, Adrien, on another victory. Had any more thoughts of joining the national team once you leave school? Mr. Davenport patted him briskly on the shoulder as Adrien passed him by. I have declined the offer. I want to attend Paris University with my friends and allow someone else to take the place, he said, placing his saber back into his bag and removing the countless wires attached to him. But there is no one greater in the whole of France, or even the world, than Adrien Agreste, let alone the pedigree that goes with the name. That's the problem. People only wanted the name. What would happen if he changed it to Adrien Graham, an English take on his mother's maiden name? Would anyone want him then? At the quick ceremony he bowed as he was handed the medal, the same model smile on his face, and was greeted with a familiar sweet scent of roses from the bouquet, which too had lost all sparkle. He glanced across the crowd with no familiar face smiling back at him. He climbed out of the back seat, leaving the roses behind, and climbed the cold steps to his home. No, his father's manor. As usual, the entrance was void of the normal parental greeting of congratulations, and just as he was about to place his foot on the first step towards his room, the weight of the medal in his hand grew heavy with spite. Adrien turned and within 2 strides knocked on his father's door and pushed it open without an invitation. "Another piece of gold for your collection, sir," he remarked with a thud, dropping the case on Natalie's former desk. "Adrien, I heard it was tight. 13 to 15? He shouldn't have been able to get that close to winning." Gabriel's controlled tone filtered through the room from where he stood gazing at the oversized tablet. Adrien groaned at what his father was implying, placing his hand around the door. "Nat played well today, so it was tight, but I still won. There's your proof." "It's not good enough for the national team." "Good job I'm not joining them. I declined the offer. I will be attending university just like the rest of my friends." "You are not your friends. You are Adrien Agreste, and I have already informed the head coach it had been a misunderstanding from your end, and you will be attending as long as it doesn't impact on your other priorities." Adrien pushed back the door in frustration. "And I informed you, sir, as I turn 18, I will no longer be guided, no, controlled by you or the company." "You think turning 18 will change that? You have always been Adrien Agreste. That is who you are. You will never be anything else. Why can't you understand and accept it?" "Because that is my name, not who I am." "You are your name. You are the brand, and being part of the French national team for the world-class fencing will be of great benefit to the brand. It has been decided." "I'm not a child anymore. You can't keep ordering me around." "You will always be my child, and therefore I have every right to guide you to the best path in life." "You mean your path, not mine. What if I simply walked out the door? What would you do then?" A cold laughter chilled every part of him and caused a haunting shiver to travel through his body. "Really? That is your rebellion? Where would you go? What would you do? No funds, and I am your only family here. Who would care for you? No, it's best you stay put and grow up if you don't want to be treated like a child. who is threatening to run away from home. You call controlling as caring, but I have friends now. I know the difference, father. Fearing what he might say if another word came out of his mouth, Adrien spun on the spot and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Taking the steps two at a time, Adrien stormed into his bedroom, anger causing his heart to thunder in his chest, sending all of his blood to his head and seeing red. How much longer did he have to put up with this man? He paced around the room, unable to focus on what he should do, as every inch of his limbs felt like they had electricity surging through them, making him extra jittery. Breathe, Adrien. I get that you're angry at him, but you need better control over your emotions. We have talked. I know. I get it, Plag. I'm trying to, but recently every time I see that man, he knows how to push my buttons. You are becoming more independent, or wanting to be, which means in the case of him, also means rebellion for you, but not at a cost. I know. Ladybug can't, she needs cat. Adrien sighed, the red now fading to a constant ache in his head. We have only got back half of the Miraculous, and Monarch is still too powerful and unpredictable. I can't risk it. I know. I think I just need some air. Go for a run. Sensing the threat had reduced, Plag zoomed off towards the mini-fridge. Run towards your princess, more like. The thought alone of Marinette seemed to help reduce the twitching feeling, and Adrien's heart to shift from hammering to skipping. Well, she did offer to hear me vent. Well, cat, if I got frustrated. Yeah, sure. Not that you're in love with her or anything. Plag sniggered between mouthfuls. Plag, we have gone through this. She is special. She is dear to me. And right now, I'm grateful for what I have. Adrien removed the fencing undergarments and replaced it with more comfortable clothing. I'm grateful for this convenient version of Camembert, you get me? Doesn't mean I don't dream of the day I can have a taste of the most perfect, specially ordered Camembert. Seriously? You and cheese? But, yeah, I dream of the day, and yet, if all I'm able to have now is friendship, then... Plus, I don't even know if she sees me that way. More than a friend? Yeah, but you won't know until you actually ask her out on a date. That won't be happening anytime soon, buddy. But in the meantime, claws out. Plag's moans got sucked into the ring as Adrien became cat, jumping out of his bedroom window. His emotions had decreased to a simmer as he ran across the rooftops, allowing his muscles memory to take him to his princess, wondering what she could be up to, hoping he won't be disturbing her. He landed on the vacant balcony and pulled open the skylight. Princess, any chance you have time for cat therapy? He called out, hoping to hear the usual giggle in response. Hey, cat! Her sweet voice called back, but seemed distant as a hand waved in the air to greet him. A little deflated at her response, he landed next to her bed before scrambling down the steps. If you're too busy. He stopped at the sight of Marinette standing in front of her whiteboard he had seen a couple of times before, chewing on the end of a marker while staring at the spider diagram. What are you up to? I know that look. He smiled, leaning in a little closer with his hand clenched behind his back. Oh, the usual, trying to find ways to raise 1 million euros, she sighed, turning to face him, but squeaked at how close he really was. What? Why? So much? Is everything okay, Marinette? Is it your parents? The panic clear in his voice as his hands gripped her shoulders. Is there anything I can do to help? He was surprised to see her eyes twinkle as a smile spread across her lips and placed a hand on top of his gloved one. You're sweet, Kitty. It's nothing like that. She patted his hand, a sign for him to let go. You know my granddad? How could he ever forget fighting him 3 times in the past year, knowing he was just as tough without the purple butterfly? It ran in the family. Yeah? He smiled, taking a step back and studied her pretty handwriting on the board. Well, since we have been reconnected, we have been hanging out more, and, well, there's a community hall in his neighborhood. It's an amazing place, really, filled with great people. A lot run down, but it adds to the charm of the building in my view. However, they received a letter from the mayor's office this morning. Due to the most recent inspection, the hall is in violation of code something, and if repairs aren't made, then it will be regarded as condemned. She huffed and shoved the pen back in her mouth and grinding on the end of it. Really? Just like that? Isn't there grants or something? Since it's a community hall. You would think, wouldn't you? But apparently not. Apparently this is all too common issue across the poorer neighborhoods of Paris. According to my parents. I mean, it's been there for generations. Supporting people through 2 world wars? How can they send a letter and that be it? He could feel her slight tremble with anger and saw signs of his everyday ladybug come to life. Is there anything I can do to help? I see you're forming a plan. Trying to anyhow, but it's a lot, Cat. They have only been given 28 days to find it. I mean, if you could see it, meet the people there. It's not just a building to them. It's a lifeline. I will help any way I can. Anything for my princess. Oh, how much he wished he could wrap her up in a hug and tell her everything would be okay. What about a patron? Or a sponsor? Help towards the total amount needed. It was suggested, but Grandad and some of the other elders of the hall said it needed to be raised by the people, for the people. What good is a community hall if there is no community to support it in times of trouble? And he's right. She glanced over her shoulder at him and gave a little nudge, causing a flutter in his stomach. Thanks, though. Oh, I haven't even offered you some tea. Treats? That's all right. I better be heading anyhow. Leave you to your brainstorming? But you haven't had your cat therapy time yet. Yes, I have. Just spending time with you is enough to brighten my mood, princess. He pressed a hand to the side of her head and leaned in. If you can think of anything I can do to help, let me know. She nodded her head slowly, her eyes locking onto his as his hand slid down a little before forcing himself to remove it altogether, fearing the blush creeping under his mask. He took a step back and slowly released his breath. I'll see you soon, princess. Thanks for popping by, Kitty. She gave his back a small wave. He jumped the steps and lifted the skylight, pausing for a split second to have one last look at his princess and absorbing the warmth of her smile. Grateful he would see it in the morning as Adrien. Good night, Marinette, he said, leaping through and shutting the window behind him. The previous angst over his father had given away to Marinette's problem and how he could help to fix it, or at least support her in some way. He could turn up as Adrien aggressed and bring the press with him to highlight the issue. No, that would be his name helping her, not him. Plus, Marinette wouldn't go for that idea. What if he was Cat and ran a campaign to help local communities? Would Ladybug support that idea? It's not as if it would be considered improper use of the Miraculous, but then again, it would be the mask helping Marinette and not him. Just Adrien. At the end of the day, what could he do without his two labels? Was his father right? He was his name. No! I refuse to believe it. What's in a name? No, he was Adrien, one of Marinette's best friends, his secret love, and he would be there for her. He would prove to himself and everyone else that he could be a hero without any form of mask. When Monday came, Adrien realized he had a problem. Marinette had told Kat about the community centre, but not Adrien. So if he just casually walked up to her and asked if he could help, that would unleash a mountain of questions, never mind the risk to his identity. No. Instead, he needed to find a way to get to her to tell him. Again, simple, right? Wrong. The issue was, she didn't. She didn't tell anyone, not even her best friend, which had been his third scenario. Rather, he had to watch how distracted she was, not completely focused on class, handing her his notes a few times, rewarded with a bright smile. But when he asked if everything was okay, she simply shrugged and said it was. Even Alia said that she was probably lost in a project, but didn't say any more. This was going to be harder than he thought. It wasn't until Friday they were self-studying in the library did his opportunity arise. Sitting at a desk in the far corner, hunched over a notebook and chewing on the end of one of her pens, Adrien noticed the familiar look she had in her eyes. The same he had seen on Sunday as Kat. She was planning. She was plotting. This was his chance. He picked up one of his library books, rehearsing what he might casually say to her as he accidentally bumped into her. And not at all jealous of the three classmates who made the simple word of hello look so easy in the 20 minutes it took for Adrien to perform his outstanding performance of Where Does This Book Go Again? The first attempt, he flicked through the book in his hands, walking past a table in front of her, not actually seeing her and resulting in her really not seeing him. The second attempt was to drop the book behind her and then apologize for the noise, which at least got a nod but nothing more. However, at this point, he decided not to listen to any of Plag's ideas, trusting the sniggering that was coming from his little buddy. Adrien groaned as he bounced the book against his forehead. This was Marinette, who when focused on something lost all track of time and place. No, he was her friend, and it was completely natural for him to walk up to his friend and ask what she was so absorbed in. He could practically hear his own heartbeat. He struggled to contain the air in his lungs. "Hey, Marinette," he breathed. Oh, the look she gave him underneath her lashes caused him to see stars. "Adrien," she said, holding the pen in her mouth before she bit back down on it again. "What project are you working on?" She gestured to the book he still held in his hand about medieval France and the fight for the throne. He quickly placed the randomly selected book behind his back and pointed his head to her notebook. I was about to ask you the same question. Oh, this? It's nothing. Just brainstorming ideas. She shrugged, like it was nothing, but the blush in her cheeks were giving her away. Too cute. Anything I can help with? Without giving her a chance to bat back his offer, he quickly pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. To be honest, I would welcome the break, and they do say 2 heads are better than 1. Really? You're not too busy? Don't you need to be leaving soon? She glanced at her watch to confirm. No, plus, what is more important than helping out a friend? He smiled softly, ignoring the fluttering in his stomach as he convinced her with his stare. Please, if I can help, Marinette, I would like to. She brushed back a strand of hair behind her ear and removed the pen from her mouth, leaving behind a blue spot on her lip. Well, I'm trying to think of fundraising ideas for a community hall. I know a little something from all those forced attendances to fundraising events. I'm glad it would come in handy one day, he said, offering her a cat noir smirk and receiving a light chuckle in response before placing a hand over her mouth to muffle the sound. She described what she had told Kat 5 days prior with no new developments and ended with another shrug of her shoulders. I'm going to head there tomorrow to help out and see if they have any further news and if their plea with the mayor office had any impact. Can I ask, would it be okay if I came along too? I don't want to sound, rude, but would your father let you, Adrienette, come to a community hall on the outer rings of the city? I mean, I wouldn't want to come as Adrienette, just Adrien. And as for my father, I can't say I'm working on a project. Please, Marinette, I want to help and see the place for myself. You won't get into trouble? He shook his head. Then, yeah. I would love that, and more help the better, really. She glanced at her watch again. I better go. Got baby duties. He did the same and realized he was going to be late for patrol with Ladybug if he didn't head back home now. I will text you later with time and location, if that's okay. Great! Look forward to it, Marinette. He gave her a broad, happy smile, elated at his own personal victory. He pushed back the chair, copying her moves, and pointed to his stuff at the other end of the room. See you tomorrow, then. And I hope babysitting goes well for you. She gave him a sweet smile back with a small wave as she rammed her notebooks in her bag and left the library first. It had worked. He couldn't believe his haphazard plan had actually worked. As he climbed into the waiting black town car, Adrien pulled out his phone and tapped on Nino's messages. Adrien, dude, I need your help with something and it needs to be a no question asked favor for now. Nino, anything, bro. I've got your back. Is it some sort of secret mission? Adrien, you could say that. I need a disguise, good enough that no one would suspect I was Adrien Agreste. Adrien woke that morning to 2 text messages, one from Marinette with a time to meet at 11 a.m. and a pinpoint location of the community hall with a smiley face emoji that made him think of her sweet smile. The second one was from Nino. Dude, you'll find everything you need at the train station locker. In locker 13, with combination 3579. There was even a gif underneath of Mission Impossible ignited fuse and explosion. Adrien couldn't help laughing out loud at how serious Nino and Alia, come to think of it, took secret missions. He was grateful to have friends like them, and today he was going to be even better friend to Marinette, if he wasn't able to be anything more for her right now. Okay, he took it back. Nino was no friend of his. Adrien stood in the station shower room he paid an extra €5 to use and stared at the contents of the bag his so-called friend had left for him. Okay, given he didn't know this was something he would have to wear in front of Marinette, or even his true feelings for her, but he did know this was something he had to wear, right? There were disguises, and there were I Love Paris caps and Mr. Banana hoodies. Adrien ripped off the note attached to the cap. Dude, you're my bro, but I don't share my caps. And placed the white hat on his head. Then he held up the black hoodie with his least favorite banana on it. Seriously, could he? Should he even wear it? To be fair, no one would even think twice he was Adrien Agreste, not even his father. He shoved the jumper over his shoulder and noticed 2 more items in his bag. A pair of plain black sunglasses, grateful for at least one normal thing, and then a comedy moustache. Instantly recognizing it from the time Nino had dressed up in the strange noir detective and accused him, Cat, of having an affair with Alia. But the more he studied it, the memory flashed in his mind of Marinette, dressed in a poncho, a helmet, and a moustache. What was it she had called herself as she gate crashed the party Nino had arranged at his? Marco? No, Mario. He couldn't help laughing at the image now in his forefront of his mind, of this adorable look on her face when he had realized it was her. And, well, if she can, so can he, right? The community hall was an old stone building on a run-down back street. In Adrien's opinion, it was old enough to be interesting, but not old enough to be historically relevant and worth registering. The neighborhood would have been dubbed that of the genteel poor in prior centuries, but now it was where everyday people of Paris lived, unable to afford the grander apartments in the city centre. The area had character, with a blend of eras and styles, the oldest ones roughly repaired with more modern materials, probably after the last World War. But they were like an ugly patchwork of living history laid out in concrete, wood, stone, and glass. No wonder the city wanted to tear it down. Between the housing crisis and the tax revenue, apartment buildings and businesses probably made more sense to Mayor Bourgeois and his cronies. The building itself barely held any traces of its former grandeur. The carved gutter spouts were crumbling, many had fallen to rubble, only to be removed from sight by the occasional street sweeper. One gargoyle remained on duty, but his expression was less of a guardian against evil and more of a nauseous pig. The large oak doors had rough, discoloured streaks where iron or bronze decorative fittings had been prized off, undoubtedly stolen to be sold for scrap. The Rosalie door knocker was broken, the gold leaf long lost to the elements. Adrien supposed it should be a sad, pitiful thing, like a starlet long past her prime, still wearing the scraps of a finery. But Marinette thought it was worth saving, even in this state, and he thought he could see why. The place had good bones, it had character, and as he would know better than most, surface beauty wasn't worth much. Should he knock? Would it be weird if he just walked in? It wasn't someone's home or anything, but Just then the door burst open as two young boys rushed by, waving various Heroes of Paris action figures and yelling about Akumas and defeating Mothman. Adrien couldn't help but snort. With all the times the Nemesis had changed his names, he wasn't surprised the little ones couldn't keep up. Mothman is the cutest and lame, he thought, chuckling to himself. I'll have to try that one next time the old man shows up in a fight. As confused as the boys were, they had solved his problem for him. He stepped through the open doors and closed the old doors behind him, the half-moon window above them letting in streams of ruby, sapphire and topaz through the stained glass. It spilled across the warped oak wood floor, barely illuminating the dingy entry hall. There were two sources of sound as far as he could tell. The first, the loudest, was the large room to his right that looked like an old parlour and solarium, but with the walls knocked out between them. The old wooden floorboards continued here, as did the pale blue wallpaper with some antique floral patterns stamped in faded gold paint. But there were great strips torn away and peeling at the corners, while the floor was scattered with every kind of seating imaginable. Camp chairs, a slew of metal folding ones, a deep wing-back armchair, beanbags, papans, and what looked like a Louis XVI sofa in battered leather up against the far wall. Kids from the lowest grades up through high school like himself sat on lay or sprawled around the room. Some played video games on some old school console system set up with several TVs across the room. Others sat round the battered tables doing homework or helping the youngest ones with theirs. There was even a little girl with blonde curls, the spitting image of Chloe when she was young before disappointment and loneliness had poisoned her. Adrien found himself drifting over to her, looking down at the pictures she had intently laid out. She reached out a chubby hand, grasped a black crayon, and started drawing a rough circle around a pair of round green eyes. He watched as she drew a black face, large black smile, black body and large feet. She stopped, giving an adorable gasp as he knelt down beside her to check if she was okay. "Is everything all right, little one?" he asked kindly. She blinked up at him steadily, not at all nervous that a stranger appeared beside her. His mouth went dry. He had been wrong. He had thought she looked like Chloe because of the hair and the bright yellow dress, but the little girl's eyes weren't blue. They were bright, vibrant green. The green of new leaves in spring. They were like his mother's eyes. "Hello," she said seriously. His lips twitched slightly before the smile could reassert itself. "Hello?" She shook her head. The serious expression deepened across her face. She reached up and put one small, slightly sticky hand to his cheek and turned his head to look at the table. She waved her other hand at the drawing and the scattered crayons. "I can't find hello." "Oh!" He scanned the table, then the floor. A yellow crayon had been knocked off the table and rolled a short way away. He leaned around the chair and the snagged crayons, presented it to her with a little bow. "Here you are, little princess. Yellow." Her eyes lit up and threw her arms in the air, performing a little wiggle dance with joy before blushing with embarrassment and gave a brief nod in thanks. Then returned to scribbling madly, the tip of her little pink tongue sticking out of the corner of her mouth. Adrien couldn't resist the urge to ruffle her curls. The girl placed a crayon down with infinite care and held up the picture to him. "Good kitty." He blinked, tears welling up in his eyes as he realized the picture was of Cat Noir. The yellow she had asked for was to color his hair and bell. Some of the frustration and bitterness was lifted from his heart as her bright green eyes crinkled at him in an expectant smile. He smiled back. "So you're a fan of Cat Noir, huh?" She nodded, turning the picture to hug it to her chest. "Good kitty.
Good cat noir.
That's Noir, Emmy, a soft, motherly voice said from behind him. He turned to see an older woman, short, plump, with short brown hair streaked with grey, laughter lines around her eyes and deeper sorrow lines around her mouth. She gave him a sweet smile, and it seemed for a moment like she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she found the burden light. Her bus was damaged during an Akuma attack last month. Her family was trapped inside with a bunch of other people, and Cat Noir saved them. He carried Emmy to safety on his shoulders. He's all she can talk about ever since. Adrien stood, trying to control the welter of emotions that swelled in his chest. He rarely got to meet the people he saved as Cat Noir, unless he already knew them personally. Yet, here was this little girl who he had rescued, and she drew a picture of him, called him a good kitty. A girl with his eyes and his mother's name. His heart warmed once more as he ruffled her curls. I've never seen you here before. What's your name?
Anathus,
he stammered, not wanting to give his real first name lest he be found out, not wanting to lie if he could avoid it. The woman held out a hand to him. Sandra, how can I help you, Anathus?
I'm actually here to help myself, he said, shaking a hand. I'm a friend of Marinette Dupin-Chang's. Do you know her?
Her smile broadened. Oh, everyone around here knows Marinette. She's probably in the dining hall. Just follow the hallway until the end. Turn left and it's the big door on the right. You can't miss it.
Thanks, Sandra. Bye, Emmy.
The little girl popped off from her chair to throw her arms around his leg.
Thank you for yellow.
You're welcome, little princess. Now I have to go and find my big princess. Maybe I'll see you later, okay?
Bye-bye.
He followed Sandra's instructions and found a large dining hall filled with folding chairs and tables. There was a long open cut-through which took up most of the back wall and looked into the kitchen, with a pair of swinging doors leading to the place from which all sorts of delicious scents were wafting. Some people in old clothes were milling around talking, many nibbling on cookies, and over at the far end of the room were Roland Dupin and Marinette. How she managed to look both cute and practical was beyond him. He had never been able to manage it without it being staged by a film crew, and that was hardly practical. She wore a long-sleeved pink t-shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a pair of denim dungarees. Her hair was in a messy bun with several dark strands hanging becomingly around her face in loose curls. She was holding out a tray of cookies to those who were coming in through another pair of doors, her back mostly to him, though he would know her midnight hair and her put-togetherness anywhere. He walked over to them, her heart racing and his smile so wide it hurt.
Marinette?
He reached out and put a hand on the girl's shoulder. She turned round, a nervous smile already in place, but when she caught sight of him, whatever she had been about to say was lost in a fit of giggles. Adrien couldn't help the pleased smile that spread across his face. Marinette always made him laugh with her wild gestures and silly expressions, not to mention her clumsiness and occasional ramblings were both adorable and endearing. But for him to be the cause of her breaking out into a loud, uncontrollable laughter, it thrilled him and warmed his heart. More than that, it sent a rush of blood to his cheeks, for her laugh was not just infectious, it was addictive, and he realized he would do anything he had to do to get his next fix.
What are you wearing?
She gasped, clutching tighter onto the tray, but her body shook with giggles. Then her eyes settled on his lips.
or rather his upper lip, pursing her own in response. Her grandfather snatched the tray of cookies from her with a fond and a roll of his eyes. "Well, I wanted to do this low-key," he murmured, embarrassed, frustrated that the hoodie prevented him from rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't do it that often, did he? "So I thought I'd come undercover?" That's one way of putting it. I mean, as long as you're peachy. She flicked the brim of his baseball cap just like Ladybug would flick his bell, and it had a similar effect on him. Heart beating double time. He leaned in and wriggled his eyebrows at her. Dropping his voice, he whispered, "Well, I only copy the best, Mario." That might have been a bit too much, for she choked on her giggles and her face turned red as beet. "I mean, I didn't have a poncho or a motorcycle helmet, but I worked with what I could get." Her hands crept up to cover her deep pink cheeks, and a sound halfway between a squeak and a whimper simpered out of her mouth. He clutched nervously as he pulled away, giving her more space and hopefully easing her anxiety. He never understood why she was so nervous around him, had been for years, when she had clearly had enough confidence around others. But just as quickly as the pink and the whimper appeared, Marinette shook her head and removed her hands. "It's a bit much, isn't it?" he asked shyly, covering the fake mustache in embarrassment. He hoped she knew he meant the teasing as well as his get-up. Her nervous smile softened, and just a hint of the pink snuck back into her cheeks. "A little?" Then her eyes narrowed in resolve. "I think the problem is your shrubbery clashes with your hair." She flicked a strand of hair that hung around under the edge of his cap. "Yeah, well, I couldn't change my hair as much as I'd like to. Can you imagine what my father would say if I shaved my head? Or what if about letting it grow long and wild in a ponytail? Yeah, that would be cool." A smile, real and bright and sparkling with ideas, lit up her face. "Well, I might not be able to grow you a ponytail, but I think I can fix it for you, at least for today. Granddad, my friend here needs a little help before we get started. Do you mind passing out the cookies for me?" Roland shot her a look. "That's not how it's done. In my day, only actors and heroes and criminals wore disguises. What is the world coming to?" "I told you. Adrien wants to help, but he's afraid of being recognized." "Why? He's a good-looking boy. He's no Jimmy Stewart." Marinette sighed and rolled her eyes fondly. She got it from him. "Look, can you just cover for your favorite granddaughter for a few minutes, please?" "If you mean my only granddaughter, then yes. But if you keep buttering me up, I'll turn into brioche." He patted her on the shoulder before levering a stern glare at Adrien. "You treat her with respect. You hear me, Mr. Mustache?" He straightened up and whipped off a smart salute. "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." Roland sniffed and turned to hand out the cookies. A little tug on his sleeve drew his attention back to Marinette. "Come on, let's get you a proper disguise." She drew him along into the kitchen area, where the volunteers were chopping vegetables and stirring large pots, while an older man in a chef's uniform was mixing something with his hands in a deep metal pan the size of a suitcase. "Paolo, do you mind if we use some of your black tea?" she asked the chef politely. "Sure thing, Marinette," he replied in a slight Italian accent, looking up at them, but his mixing motions never stopped. The scents of cinnamon, nutmeg, and apple made Adrien's mouth water. We don't have much left, but I can pick some up before coming in next time. I'll pay for it, she offered. If I use it, then I should replace it. Adrien frowned slightly. The community centre was so underfunded that the volunteers had to supply their own ingredients to feed the homeless. You're a good one, Angeletto, the chef answered with a smile. It's on the top shelf in the storeroom. Green box. Thanks, Paolo. What are you making, chef? He asked, his curiosity and his hunger combined so that the detectable scent was suddenly very distracting. At that moment his stomach rumbled, and Paolo chuckled warmly and Marinette giggled. Adrien blushed. No need to be embarrassed, young man. The rumbling stomach is but the siren song to a humble cook like me. There are some sandwiches in the cooler. Marinette, make sure to feed your principal before he washes up. If he passes out on you, your grandpa will insist on bans being published straight away. That's the way it's done, she said with him, her cheeks that beautiful peony pink once more. Her eyes slid over to him, and he couldn't help swallowing hard as she bit her lip nervously. He really shouldn't be thinking about her lips at a time like this, should he? Thanks, Paolo. And don't worry, young man. I'll save you some bread pudding for you. Marinette pulled him back into the storeroom and started scanning around the shelves for the tea. Don't fall for his humble cook routine. He means it seriously, but Paolo used to run a 5-star restaurant on the Riviera. There isn't anything that man doesn't know how to cook. He can turn leftovers into a feast for royalty, and volunteering here, he had to. What was that Paolo called you? He asked, watching her focus on the green box. She stepped onto the bottom shelf and stretched up, but the box was just barely out of reach. It means little angel. When I first started helping out here years ago, it was just me and my family. It was around the holidays and I got into everything trying to help and made a mess of my red Christmas dress. I was so upset, but Paolo took me aside and dried my tears, saying that stains couldn't hide the heart of an angel. It kinda stuck. Marinette managed to grab the box with her fingertips, but the shelf wobbled and she fell backwards. Adrien had been watching and caught her deftly within the circle of his arms. As his arms closed around her, stopping her fall, they locked eyes and his heart stuttered before pounding even harder. She was so close, smelling of vanilla and cinnamon, and the warmth poured into his chest from the contact. The pink in her cheeks grew darker, and he was sure it matched his own. Was he still breathing? Or had the world stopped just so that he could savor this moment? Adrien? She stammered, so softly that it was like a velvet touch to his soul, sending delicious shivers prickling down his spine and across his shoulder blades. Marinette, he whispered. All he had to do was tilt his head and... Can you put me down, please? Her voice was nervous squeak, and he realized she was trembling. Looking down, he realized her feet were still a good several inches off the floor. Oh, sorry, he said with a nervous laugh. As he placed her down, noticed the loss of her warm sweetness in his arms, ignoring the regret and longing. She looked up at him wide-eyed for a long moment. Had she felt how fast his heart was beating? Had she noticed he started to close the distance between them? Then she shook her head as if to clear it. Come on, I need some hot water and a clear space to work. Why? She glanced back at him, and a small smirk tugged at the bottom corner of her mouth. Oh no. How was it Marinette could smirk like that? His heart started racing once more. Heat was rising up, not only in his face, but across the rest of his body. Was she trying to make him combust? Because it's your turn to be Mario. 20 minutes later, Adrien Agreste had become Athenius. Thank goodness he had talked her out of Mario. Between the nondescript clothes, a temporary dye job with the tea that turned him from golden to a light auburn, but refusing the offer to tint his eyebrows and lashes with Marinette's eyeliner. The temptation of her face that close to his? No. His t-shirt underneath the hoodie was already soaked with sweat. The final touch was the beard guard covering his fake moustache. He admitted he didn't look at all like himself. He helped serve the crowd of people who queued up in front of the big window. Men, women, children, teens, people in wheelchairs or crutches, veterans, families with babies and toddlers. He even saw Emmy going through the line with a pale woman in her mid-20s. The little girl's eyes widened when she saw him and pointed at him and told her mum, "He gets me hello." Her mother locked eyes with him and a look of tense weariness softened. "Thank you for helping my little Emmy," she murmured, juggling the tray filled with 3 plates while steering her daughter through the line. Adrien smiled and slipped them a few extra scoops of bread pudding, which tasted as good as it smelled. Plate after plate passed before them. Then there was a mountain of dirty dishes to wash, but he didn't care about any of it because he got to spend time with Marinette. He watched how she would talk to some people as she handed out bowls of rich, hearty stew and one of her family bread buns. How she smiled at some, wrapped an old woman's hands around the bowl with a little pat, handing off a station to someone else to help a mother of 5 get her family settled at a table. Share a joke with a large, scary-looking man covered in tattoos, or give a young mother a break to eat while giving a baby his bottle. A new sensation washed over him at the sight of her cradling the infant in her arms, walking about with him, singing softly with shining eyes, took Adrien's breath away. "Marinette will make a fine wife and mother, no?" Paolo asked, pausing and ladling out more soup. "Yeah, she will," Adrien murmured, then realized what he said and blushed. The chef chuckled and clapped him on the shoulder. "Does the young man have his eyes on our little angel? Have you told her you love her?" Adrien nearly choked on his own tongue. "What? Marinette, just... we've never... The man merely smiled. "Never fear, young man. Paolo knows how to keep a secret, but you won't be able to hide it from her for too long." "How could you tell?" "I thought I had hidden it," he whispered, embarrassed. The old chef pointed to the dining hall where Marinette was now walking with the baby, resting against her shoulders, patting his back. "It's the eyes. Always the eyes. They never lie. See the way you look at her just now? You were picturing more than her, no? Like you were seeing a future with her? Together. There is a longing you cannot hide. Comprendo?" His eyes were stinging with unleashed tears. He hurriedly wiped his eyes on the sleeve of his hoodie. "Yeah, Marinette is everything I could ever want. To marry her, raise a family, grow old together would be my idea of a fairy tale." He sighed, remembering his father's extreme disapproval of anything Adrien wanted. Anything that would make him happy. But we come from such different worlds. Our families are so different. My father. Even my name is linked with causing her trouble. I wouldn't want to put her through that. Paolo wrapped a fatherly arm around his shoulder and gave him a sideward hug, something he couldn't remember his father ever doing. The old man gave him a firm pat on his chest over his heart. "Listen to old Paolo, my son. Do you know why I call her my... how do you say, little angel? Adrien shook his head. Because angels are not just beautiful. They are good and kind, see, but it is true. But they are also warriors. That one, he pointed once more at Marinette, is an angel with a golden heart. She gives and it is in her nature, but there is a fire inside of her, small yet fierce. People see she is sweet and not always how mighty she can be. I think you do. Once you open these, he pointed at Adrien's eyes, you open this too. Paolo's hand slammed against Adrien's heart. Amore. Never underestimate the power of the heart, young man. Comprendo? But how could I ever be worthy of her? Adrien said under his breath, ashamed at his own thoughts. How could he ever hope to earn her love? She knew who she was. She knew what she wanted out of life and was willing to grasp it tight with both hands. How many times had she fought the petty injustices of Chloe and Lila and others? How many times had she fought for him? He didn't even know what he wanted out of life, had never been given the opportunity to try and fail on his own merits. The life of constant expectations had robbed him of more than just his self-worth. It had robbed him of anything worthwhile. I don't deserve her. Maybe, maybe not. But her heart is a gift that she can give as well. And no one ever doubts the gift she chooses to give, do they? At that moment, Marinette caught his eyes across the room and smiled. It was a wide smile, sweet and natural, without the least hint of anxiety. Adrien felt his stomach flip over at the overwhelming curl of her lips. Paolo chuckled and squeezed his shoulder one last time. Amore! When she sends you smiles like that, I say there is hope for you yet. Who would have thought that passing out food and washing dishes would be so exhausting? Adrien yawned and stretched to his full height to work the kinks out of his back. Marinette chuckled as she wiped down the tables. Everybody? He laughed and resumed sweeping the floor. I guess you're right. I blame my upbringing, not me. You know what I realized? I think I would have preferred growing up somewhere more like the bakery. I think I would have been happier there. He stared at the wooden handle, holding his breath, waiting for her response. A spray bottle of cleaner popped out of her hand like a cork from a champagne bottle. Really? He quickly stole a glance her way. Oh, he shouldn't have done that. The look on her face. Quickly he focused on the floor once more, sweeping the same spot for the 6th time. Yeah, haven't you ever thought about what it would have been like if we had met when we were kids? Younger kids, anyway. I can't say I have, she murmured, with the quiet shuffling sound of the cloth against the plastic table resumed. I guess I'm learning that looking backwards only helps if we can learn from it, you know? Otherwise, it's just a trap. I find it's too easy to get lost in my own thoughts, ending up running in circles, not moving forward. I know that feeling. He shifted a little closer, swooping towards her for a minute in silence, but it wasn't an awkward one. It gave him some time to compose his thoughts when he realized something. Is that why you work so hard? You help others so you don't lose yourself? She stopped what she was doing and looked up at him with a soft smile, but her eyes were wide with surprise, as if he had just seen something secret no one had spotted before. Sort of. I mean, that's part of it, I guess, but there is something so real about helping others. Does that make sense? He edged a little closer. Could you explain it to me? She twisted the clean cloth in her hand, looking like she was calculating what to say next, and the light blush signaled she was nervous a little. Well, take the little things I make for you guys for the holidays. I enjoy making things, but I don't need 24 hats or necklaces or scarves. I certainly don't need a new fancy dress every few months, but because I'm making them for you, I get to enjoy them twice. I enjoy the process, but I enjoy seeing you happy more. He caught her eyes, his heart beating out a samba at her words. It makes me happy whenever you make me something, Marinette. It gives me an insight into how much time and talent and love you put into each one, and I can't help but feel happy, no matter what it is. Though, here he dropped his voice into a mused roar, I don't have much use for lots of fancy dresses either. She blinked at him for a moment, cheeks blooming pink, before the laughter burst from her. It filled him to overflowing, and he couldn't help but laugh as well. Seriously? The thought of you in a pink frilly dress with a sweetheart neckline is too much, she said between giggles. Yeah, I don't exactly have the figure for it, do I? Pursing his lips like many of the female models did, one hand on his waist, Adrien sashayed around the tables towards her in a flamboyant swaying of his hips. Marinette's giggles increased as she clutched her sides and gasped for air. Adrien, stop! I can't breathe. He stopped close to her, one hand on her shoulder to steady her. But really, Marinette, I see why you want to save this place. The people, Paolo, the old folks, the little kids. This isn't just a building to them. It's like a home, a family. And I want to help to save it. The laughter died on her lips, and the pink in her face darkened to a rosier hue. She smiled at him, her nervous smile, and took a step away from him, biting the corner of her lip, but keeping her eyes on his. Would you like to come round? She blurted out, jumbling her words. Supper, my mum making, we can talk. He grinned, warmed anew by the return of her shyer side. He loved that she could show him so many sides of herself and longed to be able to do the same. To tell her how much she meant to him, that she was his princess. There is nothing I would like better, Marinette. Shoo, you two, Paolo called from the kitchen. Head on out and enjoy yourselves. You've worked hard this afternoon. Are you sure you don't need any help? Marinette asked. The old chef shook his head. No. I'm just preparing some marinade for tomorrow. I can clean as I go. If you're sure, Adrien said, looking at Marinette hopefully out of the corner of his eye. I am. You're only young once. Make the most of it. Within minutes they had finished their cleaning and they were walking back to the bakery in companionable silence, Adrien making sure to accidentally brush her hand with his from time to time just to see the pink come back in her cheeks, silently wishing just once to take her hand in his. Thanks for all your help today, she murmured, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, but not really looking at him. It was nothing compared to what you do, he said, lost in thought, and shrugged his shoulders. There must have been something about his tone or voice that brought her up short. She grabbed his shoulder and turned him to look at her. Adrien, you are one of the kindest, most caring people I know. Just because you don't have many opportunities to help others doesn't mean you're a bad person. Far from it. You help where you can. You drop everything to come and help with my great uncle, remember? Then you stayed with me all day, even when we found out I didn't need you to translate. And when you found out about the campaign to cut down the trees in the park, you stood up against your own father for something you believed in. You saved me from Akuma's several times with no thought for yourself. You tried to help Jheqia feel better when Rose got sick. Those aren't small to me. Those are amazing. Just like you. His face burned as he saw the determination and the sincerity in her eyes. She was looking up at him with a steady, confident gaze that totally disarmed him. You're amazing too, Marinette. You always have been, he breathed, wanting so much to cup her face and stare into those ocean eyes which could see him so clear, even more than he could see himself. Her lips twitched and a little snort sipped out from her. What? He asked, slightly hurt. I really meant it. She fought to smother another giggle. I know, but it's hard to take you seriously in that mustache. Why don't we take it off already? I can't, he grumbled under his breath. What do you mean you can't? I think I used the wrong type of glue. She raised an eyebrow at that. What kind of glue did you use? Super glue? Nino suggested. It was in the bag. What? Adrien! That thing has been glued to your face for hours. We have to get you back to my place now, or your father is going to kill you. She grabbed his hand and dragged him along as fast as she could go. He had to suppress the smile. How adorable she was being, and how his wish had come true. Fair, it wasn't the romantic holding hands, but still, their fingers were intertwined. Can't I just wash it off with hot water or something? Trust me, I glued my fingers together once. Hot water won't cut it. What? He stopped, but she kept moving, resulting in both of them stumbling. Then how do I get this stupid thing off my face? He could feel the panic starting to rise now at the obvious concern. Why would Nino put in that glue if it was so hard to get off? He noticed a little vibration in his pocket as Plag tried to hold back his laughter. Oh, that tiny creature of destruction, now destroying a perfect day by obsessing Marinette like this, let alone his father. Don't worry, I know what to do, but it could be difficult. That was an understatement. It turned out the solution was nail polish remover on the end of a cotton bud, which the smell alone made his eyes water, but an hour of Marinette's face against his as she prized off the moustache bit by bit, forcing him to look anywhere but her eyes locked onto his lips. The sensation of her breath tickling against his skin and thinking about anything, including Plag's list of his favourite cheeses to keep his cheeks from turning a burning colour, was hard. Never, ever again. he would take 100 rounds with Monarch, then face that kind of torture again. But sure enough, eventually the moustache came off with a stinging jerk. He slumped in relief as Marinette cheered, throwing the revolting thing away. "You looked like you just opened your first Christmas present," he said, rubbing some cream above and on his lips. She had suggested to reduce the redness. Her eyes locked on to the movement of his finger and blushed a pretty pink prior to realizing what she was doing. Then, in a fluster, she turned her back to him before saying, "Yeah, well, if only saving the community hall was such an easy solution." "Hey!" Without thinking, he stood up and spun her around and wrapped her in his arms. "I call you our everyday ladybug for a reason, you know. You can do anything you set your mind to, Marinette, and I will do whatever I can to help and support you." For a long moment, she relaxed against him, and he reveled in the sweetness of holding her. Then she tensed and pulled away slowly until his hands were resting on her shoulders. "Thanks, Adrien. You're a good friend." There was sadness in her voice, and she wouldn't meet his eyes. Why did those words hurt so much? He was proud to be her good friend, even if he wasn't able to be anything else to her right now. "You mentioned Jheqia earlier?" he said, trying to dispel the sorrow from her voice by offering some suggestions. "And the tree campaign. Why don't you see about getting our friends together to help? Many hands make light work and all that. And don't Mylene and Ivan live for this kind of thing? I'm sure they would be happy to pitch in." She sighed. "I don't know. Alia has that intern at the TV station. Nino has his job at the Steps Club and his film class. And Luca is out on tour with his dad. Mylene and Ivan have their apprenticeships. Everyone is busy. Everyone has their own lives. I would hate to be a burden." His right hand glided to her chin, lifting it up so that she could see how sincere he was, gently sliding his thumb up and down her jawbone. "You're not a burden, Marinette. How many times have you been there for all of us? We all owe you so much, and you've never asked anything of us for a thing. I bet most of our friends would be happy to help however they could. I know I am." A playful smirk danced across his lips. "Besides, I think you're the glue that held all of us together all these years. We surely would have fallen apart without you." She looked up at him sharply for the puns, and her eyes shrewd. Had he just given himself away? Then she snorted again and shook her head. She pushed him slightly on the shoulder, his hand dropping from her face, but the look alone sent tingles coursing through him. "You're a dog. You know that, right?" He put on an innocent face and decided to push his luck. Nudging her shoulder with his arm, he said, "Yeah, but you know you love me." She gave a slight gasp, and her cheeks rosy once more. The silence was immediate, and an expectant tension wrapped around them like a thick fog. Adrien felt drawn to her, but she looked so uncertain, so torn. Was this his chance to confess? "Kids, come down and set the table for supper," Supreme called from downstairs. His heart dropped, but relieved at the same time as he let out the breath he'd been holding on to. Not sure what he would do if she turned him down. Marinette gently nudged him, her voice low. "Come on, we better go help." As she turned to go, Adrien grabbed her hand. "Wait. All joking aside, Marinette, you are so amazing and special to me. To all of us. You would never be a burden. It's okay to ask for help sometimes. We care about you. I care about you. Her eyes were moonlit pools he could drown in. Her lips were parted in surprise, and the curled strand of hair that fell around her face taunted him, daring him to reach out and use them as an excuse to caress her cheek. She seemed to pull herself back from wherever her mind had wandered and squeezed his hand gently. I care about you too, Adrien. Then she rolled her eyes at him. Even if you are a dork sometimes. He tilted his head to the side, leaning in slowly so she could step back. As long as I'm your dork, I'm happy. He gave her the slightest kiss on her cheek before leading her to the trapdoor. Yeah. My dog, sure. After dinner and the dishes were done, he had never washed so many dishes in his life, having the wrinkles and the sharp scent of mint with lemongrass to prove it. Marinette and Adrien were greeted with a slice of her papa's famous strawberry 4-layered mousse cake and the suggestion of a round of Mega Strike 3. He happily agreed, knowing he had another hour until he needed to be back, especially when he took the fast route home. After 2 lost battles, he consoled himself with a large fork-filled mouthful and felt the sweetness dance around his taste buds. Catching Marinette giggling in the corner of his eyes, he turned round to face her as a hand hovered in front of his lips. As if realizing what she was about to do, a hand dropped to the coffee table and picked up the napkin under one of the plates and offered it to him instead, with a deep blush forming across her cheeks. It's pretty good, isn't it? I would say it's maybe my favorite at this time of year. She smiled, looking away as he removed the cream and picked up the controller again. Time for another battle? Planning to beat me again? He chuckled, distracting himself from the thought of her fingers drifting over his lips. Planning on letting me? She raised her eyebrows. Oh, trust me, I'm not. You just have a gift at this game, knowing when and where to strike. She let out a mischievous giggle. I've had a lot of practice. She paused and then turned to look at him, her eyes not reaching his. I was wondering if you are still up for helping with the community center. She waited for a confirming nod or a gesture. Well, Grandad and Papa have organized a baking event. A competition, if you like. And Maman is putting together a tea party. Apparently, I'm not allowed to take part in the competition. Something about not being fair. Anyway, but I'm helping out during the day. If you want to join. I mean, you might have a photo shoot or plans. She carefully studied the avatars on the TV screen. No, I'm free, he said rather fast. Too fast to be considered playing it cool. I have no plans. Well, so far anyway. Are you preparing any treats for the day? On Friday, we're baking cookies and small cakes to sell. She gave him a playful, quizzical look that made his heart stumble and fall. Are you want to help? Well, the thing is, I've never baked before. So I was... What? Never? Her eyes widened and her hand covered her mouth. He wasn't surprised by her reaction, the daughter and granddaughter of a baker, but still. He rubbed his hand at the back of his neck. It wasn't really something we did in my house. Ordering, yes. I might have decorated a few cookies at a charity event when I was little. His hand now twisting the paper napkin in his lap. Marinette gently placed the controller down. Then, Adrien, it's my duty as your friend. A sharp pain hit him at the word, but the touch of a hand on top of his soothed it a little. To teach you. It would be my pleasure to teach you at least how to bake a perfect sugar cookie, plus decorate it like a pro. He couldn't help staring at her hands on top of his. Slowly, sliding a hand off, he instantly clamped his around hers. Really? That would be okay. It would mean the world to me, having you teach me. He watched as her gaze rested on their hands intertwined, whilst the blush on her cheeks darkened. Was he maybe being too bold? First the kiss on the cheek, now this. With a little squeeze, he released some of his grip so that if she wanted to let go, she could. But didn't. Yes, really. And I'm happy to teach you anytime. The thing is, Adrien, I've really enjoyed. Her voice came to a sudden stop as the door of the apartment swung open. Her hands quickly retreated out of his grip and grabbed hold of the controller. He couldn't help but notice how his cold hands now felt without her warmth. How are we getting on here? Do you want me to fight the winner? Tom's voice boomed out. Actually, I had better be going. He shuffled to his feet. He knew it was true. He had to be back before he was missed. But to leave here? To leave her? Wondering out what she was about to say? Oh, really? That's a shame. Tom's eyes darted between the couple, smiling at them. Papa, well, I have invited Adrien to come on Friday. To help with the baking and the decorating? Great! You are more than welcome to join us, and I hope we can rely on you for Saturday too. But maybe this time without the moustache. Tom burst out laughing as Adrien's hand landed on the top lip, grateful for the touch of skin and not the fake hair. He watched as Marinette's sapphire eyes sparkled as the laughter erupted out of her too, resulting in Adrien following. It was still rare for him to laugh to the point his sides cried out in pain. Actually, come to think of it, Marinette, it was only around her it ever happened. To feel this much joy was a blessing only his little angel could give. As the day broke on Monday morning, Adrien had never been this excited about school before and a chance at seeing Marinette again. They had messaged each other a couple of times on the Sunday, trying to find excuses to chat, bouncing around ideas for fundraising. So as he climbed out of his car to find Marinette for once early, waiting for him caused his body to explode with a mixture of emotions. His stomach flipped pancakes as butterflies danced around to the increased tempo of his heartbeat. Morning, she said with a blushing smile and shoved a box in her hands at him. Here, Papa, breakfast. Morning, Marinette. He grinned back, taking the box from her hands. What is... He opened to find an enormous croissant, which seemed to be filled with cheese and crispy lardons. His smile turned into a small chuckle at the thought of his father's expression as he watched him eat such a thing. Oh, but it smelled amazing. Mouth-watering temptation. Yeah, on my way out, Papa, he gave me... asked if you would like this for breakfast. I think he made it especially. We don't normally sell. You don't need to eat it. I know with your diet. She held out her hands as if offering to take it back. Which is exactly why I will be eating this. And did you see your papa made this? For me? She nodded her head and then grinned as he reached into the box and took a large mouthful of the delicious treat. Wow! This is... He took another bite, the buttery pastry melting against the gooey cheese, and the salty taste of the lardons finished it perfectly. A small whack hit him against his chest, a sign from Plag not to eat it all. Thank you! The bell rang out for the start of school and placed the box in his bag. Shall we? He gestured, watching her clenched hands unravel and drop to her sides, wishing, hoping, one day he would have the courage to take it in his and feel the warmth of her touch. The rest of the week seemed to fly by. Each morning he was greeted with Marinette holding a small box of goodies and becoming more relaxed around him, much like he had experienced on Saturday. As Friday arrived, he practically jumped out of bed. Today he had the chance to spend the day at school with Marinette, and then afterwards he had managed to get 3 hours to work on an important project. He had informed Natalie anyway. He stepped over the threshold, the chime of the bell, the sweet buttery scent of cakes and bread. He felt happy, peaceful, excited. Home. Yeah, that was it. His stomach lurched at the thought. He felt at home. Oh, what he would have wished home would feel like anyhow. Adrien! Tom and Sabrine called out. It's good to see you again, and thank you for helping out. He stepped forward bashfully. No, thank you for all the delicious breakfast treats I have been receiving. Breakfast? What do you... We had better start! Marinette called out, taking everyone by surprise, especially him when her hand wrapped around his, guiding him forcefully past her parents and towards the back baking room. Sorry, didn't mean to. I just know you don't have much time, so She paused in the middle of the room, her hand still clenched around his. He grinned. He didn't mind at all. But if he should speak or move, would she let go? No, it's fine. He gave her an excited smile. I'm happy to get started. He decided to give her hand a little squeeze and see how she responded. She held his gaze as if she was trying to tell him something whilst she gave his hand a squeeze, rubbing the thumb over his. Great. And I actually have something for you. He loosened the grip on his hand as she slid it away, skipping to the back shelf of the baking room and lift down a box. Welcome, new member of the Dupang Tang Bakery. We are delighted to have you here, and note, it is a lifetime membership, so no matter what happens, you will always be welcome home. She finished by giving a little bow and presented the box out to him. He didn't know what to say or do. Something like this had never happened to him. A monsoon of a wave crashed over him, washing him in warmth, tenderness, belonging. This was everything. His eyes stung as he tried to hold back the tears. That would seem silly, right? Thank you, he said in a croaky voice. His fingertips touched hers as he took the box from his princess, placing it down on the counter. He lifted the lid and was presented with a green version of the Dupang Tang aprons. the cream logo embroidered in the middle. But what caught his eye was the single word. Adrien. Elegantly hand-stitched in the right-hand corner with the black thread. It was permanent. No removable name tag when they were replaced. What had Marinette called it? A lifetime membership? He really liked that idea. Oh, Adrien, are you okay? Is something wrong? Is it too much? She peered closer at him, angling her face in front of his. He shook his head and gave her a smile that reached his eyes. Good. Her hands landed on his cheek, brushing her thumb across his cheek, and noticed how wet it was for the first time. I was afraid then, for a moment, that I had gotten it wrong. How are you getting on in there? Are you starting on the cupcakes or the cookies? Sabrine called out, her voice and footsteps getting closer. Good! Oh, good! Marinette leapt backwards and aimed towards the ingredients while he was still a little stunned, wiped the rest of the tears away with his sleeve and placed the apron over his head. I think simple vanilla cupcakes, she shouted, and then dropped her voice as the door opened. Whilst they are baking, I can show Adrien how to make sugar cookies. Sounds like a wonderful plan. You have everything under... Oh, you are wearing the apron, Adrien. Lovely. You know, Marinette does all the stitching herself. Really? Amazed, but not surprised. It's nothing, shall we? I am more than happy to be a member of the bakery. A member? Is that so? It's wonderful to have you here, isn't it, my darling? He could swear he saw a smirk for the first time filter across Sabrine's lips. Suddenly, Marinette darted in front and guided her mum back around to face the door. Well, we need to get started. Time is ticking by, Marinette said in a voice which was half laughter and the other half strained. Okay, you know where to find us if you need anything. Sabrine smiled and headed back down the corridor with a giggle echoing off the walls. Marinette, are you alright? And would you mind... He gestured to the straps in his hands. Yep, fine. She stood behind him and tied the straps into a bow. I'll grab mine and then we can get started. Would you mind grabbing the scales and the bowls from the sides? She stepped away and grabbed a pink version of his apron with Marinette in the right-hand corner. He felt even more now a member of the bakery, a member for life. He smirked to himself as he placed down the bowls and the wooden spoons. Truth be told, cupcakes were easier than he thought they would be. To be honest, it reminded him of chemistry, how the different elements came together and you had to get the key factors right for it to work. Temp, measurements, ingredients, and the bonus was he got to eat it once it was done, which was first for chemistry. Okay, wow, maybe he is 100% a dog. Yeah, a dog that blushed like crazy when she leant over his shoulder to watch what he was doing, or how she placed her hand over his, guiding him on how to fold the batter. Once the cakes were in the oversized ovens and resisted the urge to stand there and watch them rise, she encouraged him over to make a start on the cookies. She chopped the cold butter into chunks and dropped them into the flour. Surprised when she placed her hands into the mixture and rubbed it between her fingertips to create breadcrumbs effect. But when it was his turn, getting the mixture all over his hands, she stepped in again, demonstrating before guiding his fingers with hers. I think it's because your hands are a little hot. You were melting the butter faster. You're getting sick, are you? Coming down with a fever? She glanced at her hands and then at his forehead. No, I think I'm fine. I don't feel hot. Sometimes it's mild. Lower your head down a little, please. He couldn't help giving her a questioning look, but did as she asked, not expecting her lips to press against his forehead, lingering for what felt like forever, not wanting it to stop. Nope, you're good. No fever. How could you tell? My mum told me a few times now, if you didn't have a thermometer to hand, you would use her lips. Since they are very sensitive to touch, they can pick up body temperature more accurately than a hand would. Sorry if I should have explained before I... No, it's good. Sound science makes complete sense. To be honest, he didn't care if it made sense or not. Marinette had just kissed him for the first time. For the rest of the evening, he was in a rosy daze, filled with sweet, sugary scents. Failed attempts at icing and laughing so hard his stomach ached. But they had achieved the goal, and it felt amazing. He hung up his apron with 5 minutes to spare to make sure he was cleaned up, grinning as he watched Marinette place her apron over his, knowing they would be together until the next time he baked here. His phone notified him the car was here, and it was time to bid goodnight. Thank you for letting me help. I don't think I've had that much fun in a long while, or maybe ever. Hey, we still have tomorrow to handle and convince people to part with their money for one. They are masterpieces. They are made with love. She caught his gaze and blushed, sending his heart skyrocketing to the moon. I had a lot of fun this evening, and I don't think I would have gotten it all without you helping. He gave her a playful nudge in response with a questioning look, resulting in her doing the same, grabbing on to each other's arms with their faces millimeters apart. He was about to kiss her. His phone dinged again, and if he wanted to attend tomorrow, he had to leave now. I had better go, but I will meet you there early tomorrow. Night. He dashed down the corridor and through the side doors of the car waiting for him. He looked at the front screen of his phone and the picture he took of Marinette with pink icing on her cheeks instead of blusher and pretending to be a doll, trying to convince him they make the scariest horror characters, but it was no use. She was too cute. He made a note of the time, 10 p.m, and he had to be there at 8 a.m, which meant he only needed to last 10 hours. He would be fine. He was not fine. Blaming it on the sugar, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, highlighting images replayed like his favorite movie over in a loop inside his head, engulfed in the scent of vanilla and strawberries and sweetness. He smelled like Marinette, even after a shower, realizing that it wasn't a scent from a bottle she used, but it was just her. The amazing her. Once he read a couple of comics and a manga book to distract himself and possible romantic research, he passed out at 2 a.m. Blurry-eyed and wishing he could still have another hour of sleep, Adrien asked Maurice if he wouldn't mind stopping by a small coffee shop on the way, surprising the barrister with an order for 10 coffees and 1 green tea for Sabrine. I mean, It would be rude to turn up with only one for himself and Marinette. Maurice even helped Adrien carry in the box filled with takeaway cups of coffee, and in return got a sample bag of treats. Adrien proudly told his bodyguard he had made them last night. There was even a small smile as he left Adrien to it. Before they knew it, everything was ready. One room was set out as a small shop with an arrangement of baked goods for sale in a variety in skill levels from small children to professionals that looked too good to eat. At the other side of the hall were Adrien and Marinette helping Sabine recreate a tea house with small cakes, a friend playing the piper, and for a fee donated towards the funds, Sabine performed a tea ceremony. Adrien had seen a couple of traditional tea houses in Shanghai with his father for business reasons, but this was different and created a relaxed atmosphere people seemed to love. The icing on the cake, so to speak, was to see Marinette and Sabine in traditional clothing, including the musician. However, it was decided it would be best for Adrien to help serve from the kitchen and to help fulfill the orders. He had hoped there might have been a couple of quiet moments he could have had with Marinette where they could discuss further ideas for raising funds or simply time to themselves. But word had spread through the neighborhood of the event, causing a line to appear down the block. He hadn't even noticed his phone calling in his back pocket, so when Maurice turned up in front of the hall 3 hours earlier than he was supposed to, holding out a phone in his hand, Adrien knew something was wrong. Before he had a chance to say something to Marinette, Adrien saw his bodyguard before he saw him and darted through the crowd of people to stop him from coming further and making a scene. It was the last thing he or his new friends needed. He somehow managed to shuffle the enormous man into one of the small back rooms and was presented with the phone shouting his name. Adrienette! Get into the car this instant if you still want to see your friends and attend school come Monday. Gabriel sneered down the phone, and for once, Adrien was glad he wasn't FaceTiming him. But why, father? It's not the agreed time. It's not what we agreed to, full stop. I will discuss this at home. The phone went dead, and Adrien went back to his bodyguard. I will come with you, but please, can I say bye first? If I don't tell Marinette that I've left, she will get worried about me. A soft smile spread across his lips at the idea of Marinette concerned for him. But then it vanished once he realized he would have to tell her why. It wasn't right to lie to her, but knew it wouldn't sit easy with her either. Maurice nodded his head in confirmation. Thank you. I'll be less than 2 minutes. Go to the car and I'll join you there. Adrien dashed through the crowd and into the tea house, spotting Marinette in the corner servicing customers. Excuse me, just for 1 second, please. Adrien nodded his head in apologies and then leaned in to whisper. I have to go. Someone back by my father. I will call you or text. Either way, I will let you know, okay? He leaned back and saw that worry face. It'll be fine, trust me. Feeling bold, he added a quick kiss on her cheek, smiling at her eyes widening. Talk soon. Before she could say a single word, he dashed through a side door that took him into the alleyway and the main street. On the ride back, Adrien listed off all the counterpoints his father might make to his son being involved in such a scheme, and ready to battle off against him. This was too important to back down from. Adrien aggressed, his father growled from his office. Adrien gave Plag a look for him to remain calm, sensing his little buddy was already getting worked up in his pocket. Yes, father? What do you think you are doing?
What gave you the cause to get involved in such locations? They are fundraising events for a community centre. I would have thought it would be good PR, at least for the Aggress brand. Your son doing charity work? Charity work, yes. Selected charities, yes. I can get Natalie to draw up a list on fashionable charities which would suit the brand. But a rundown community centre on the outer ring of the city is a firm no. What would people think of the Aggress brand, knowing my son was dressed like that? Washing up, serving tea and cakes. But I didn't go as Adrien Aggress. I went as Adrien or Anathese. Some of them know me as, but I was never Adrien Aggress to them. Which is why I am wearing a Mr. Banana hoodie. I want to do some things as me, not a brand or anything else, just me. I thought we talked about this. You are the brand. You are Adrien Aggress. There is no getting around it or hiding it. You are the name. But if you step out of line or bring shame down to all those who work and support you, I will have to take drastic action. How can supporting and helping a community filled with amazing and warm and loving people get back on their feet? How would that bring shame to anyone? Turning a blind eye when someone needs help? Leaning on pride, refusing to lend a hand? But I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of helping this new group of friends I've made. But who was it that introduced you to the idea? Hoping you would come in, write a big check and then leave? There was no way he would tell his father it was Marinette. He would protect his princess no matter what. No! In fact, that was the last thing they wanted. In fact, I had to pry the information out of them and offer my support. They want the community to help and support the community. Then why is my son getting himself involved? Because why wouldn't I? And it also looks good on university applications. Why would that matter when you will spend half your time training with the national team and the other half working at the Aggress brand? Why won't you listen? I'm sick of being your puppet. This is my life. But whilst you are under my roof, you will follow my rules. Got that? Now go to your room. You are grounded for the rest of the weekend, and if you take any further steps, I will remove you from school. You can complete your exams at home, and I will restrict access to the internet. Father, you can't keep doing this. Believing locking me away to deal with the situation instead of talking about it? Hearing what I have to say? But then again, you have never been interested in what I have to say. You hold no weight to what I think or feel, so why bother? He had to take a step back and breathe. When I turn 18, Father, you will have no right to treat me this way. I will be an adult and no longer under your care. So maybe you should just reflect on that. Adrien hurriedly turned and stormed out of the office, knowing he might have gone too far in the last 5 minutes for his father to handle, but then again, at some point, he had to say it. He slammed his bedroom door behind him and crashed onto the bed. Great. This was just great. He quickly sent Marinette a message saying he was all right, just grounded again, but not to worry. Given there was a high possibility that his father could send in his assistant to retrieve his phone and switch off the outside world. Ugh! He couldn't remain still, every part of his body twitching with restlessness. No, simply put, he was fuming. How dare his father treat him like a child? Being grounded to his room because he wanted to help people? Because he wanted to spend time with Marinette. He stormed around his room, fighting off the feeling of the walls closing in around him. His father's fist squeezing every choice, every freedom, every friendship, every love from his life, leaving behind a withered husk of a man. When his 10th circuit around his room failed to retrieve his frustration and hurt, he slid down the walls of the windows and wrapped his arms around his knees, unable to stop the angry tears which welled up in his eyes. "You know," Plag said casually, curling himself on Adrien's knee, kneading it with his paws, "I've always wanted to see what your father would look like with no hair. I mean, the man's head does look like a bleached duck's butt, but I'm thinking a tiny little catalysm would improve things, just saying." Adrien snorted. "Knowing you, you couldn't control it, and I'd have to call Ladybug to clean up your mess. If she knew why I turned this gilded cage into a black hole, you know she would back me all the way, kid." He scrubbed his eyes with his wrist to banish the tears. "Yeah, I know. She probably put everything right back again just so that I could have a go at him herself. Nobody messes with her kitten either." The Kwame sighed in contentment. "Yep, your bug would open up Taekwondo on his behind faster than Sugar Cube could say cookies. Yeah, she would have a game face on and give him a right tongue slashing about treating a kitten with more respect. That's what." Adrien couldn't help but chuckle, even if he was weak and thick with unleashed tears. "Yeah, she probably would. Thanks, Plag. Don't mention it. Though, you know who else would take on your old man? Nino and Alia." "Oh yeah, them. They would too, but I was thinking more about Pigtails." He smiled. "Yeah, she would bring him a cake she made herself, play mother and pour his tea, and manage to convince him to let me live my own life. I was thinking more that she would knock his block off. Plag! After the other plan didn't work, of course. You heard that chef said, Marinette may be sweet, but she's a fighter." He patted Adrien's knee gently. "I like her. She's good for you." He reached down and scratched behind the little cat's ears with a finger. "Thanks, buddy." "Why don't you put on the ears and go and see her? You know she'll listen to cats. It always makes you feel better when you're around her." "Yeah, that would be good." After locking his door, Adrien transformed and leaped out into the gathering gloom. Marinette was on her balcony, almost as if she knew he needed her and was waiting for him. But when he got closer, he saw her slumped shoulders hunched in on herself against the railing. "Princess, are you okay?" he asked softly as he landed silently on the roof behind her. He knew she startled easily sometimes. She turned to look at him, and he noticed that her nose was pink and her beautiful ocean eyes were red-rimmed. Oh, hey, cat." She tried to sound cheerful and hurriedly wiped her eyes on her sleeve, trying to find the traces of tears. "I didn't expect you to be out tonight. Is everything okay?" "I believe I asked you first," he said, falling slightly on the balcony floor beside her. She sighed and looked out into the night once more. "Have you ever felt like you've let someone down, Kitty?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, all the time. But surely a princess like you would never let someone down you cared about."
You'd be surprised, she mumbled. I've been super stressed over trying to save the community hall I told you about last time. Well, my friend Adrien has been helping a lot, encouraging me to ask for help, doing everything he can, even doing dishes and sweeping floors, Cat. She held her hands open to the lights of Notre Dame across the river. He's even been having fun, letting loose, maybe for the first time since that umbrella closed over my head, the first day I knew him. But then his father summoned him home like some sort of servant at his beck and call. Her hands clenched into fists, and he could hear her growling under her breath. Plag was right, he thought in wonder. She would go head to head with father. More than that, I think she'll win. Sounds like he's a pretty special friend, he whispered, putting his hand on her shoulder in comfort, though he wanted nothing more than to hug her for her defense of his other self. Adrien's lucky to have you in his life, Marinette. I know I am, even though I'm a black cat and don't deserve it. Oh, please. You deserve everything, you silly kitty. She turned, a smirk on her lips that was quickly replaced by uncertainty as her eyes met his. Her eyes flickered between his hand on her shoulder and his face as a deep blush bloomed like a rose garden across her face. She took a slight step back and his hand fell away. She scratched her cheek, looking anywhere but at his face. Can I tell you a secret, Cat? He smiled at her and gestured her over to a beach chair. Of course, princess. You're my friend. I won't tell anyone you don't want me to. She sat down and sat next to her. Adrien is more than just my friend? His heart kicked into high gear at her words. Really? Well, not exactly. For me, it's complicated. You see, I've been in love with him for so long, but I can never seem to speak straight in front of him until recently, and that is only because I had promised myself to let him go. You see, I started seeing another friend in a new light. He's very special to me too, but I've always kind of kept him at arm's length, and because of Adrien, I'm feeling like a mess, and with school, the fundraising, the commissions, not to mention being interrupted in the middle of stuff because of Akumas. She sighed and popped her head into her hands. I've just been so lonely, Cat. And then suddenly, Adrien seems to want to spend more time with me, just when I've been trying to let him go. Both guys are amazing, and I know I have feelings for both of them. But I feel sometimes that Adrien needs me more. Like, he can't let himself be free with many people, and yet choosing to open up to me. And then today, with his father, just commanded him to go home. And Adrien sent me a text saying that he was grounded for helping me with the fundraiser. I just feel like I must have let him down somehow. What was she saying? She had feelings for him, but also taking on all the responsibility? You don't think that... Marinette, may I give you a hug? His heart pounding madly in his throat. She sniffled and nodded. Wrapping her in his arms, he rested his chin on top of her head, and a purr rumbled forth from him without even trying. She chuckled and relaxed into his embrace. This felt right. This felt amazing. To be here for her like this. I know what it's like to be lonely too, princess, he murmured, rubbing small circles on her back. It's hard and it hurts, and it's something you should never have to feel. You were amazing, Marinette, and you should never feel that you are only worthy if you can set everything right. Some things take time and effort to fix. Some problems take many hands and heads and hearts to get a job done, like the community hall, or a relationship between Adrien and his father. You can't stop Monarch on your own, though I didn't put it past you once you got going. He rubbed his cheek against her hair and a hint of the giggle. Sometimes we all need help, but it also doesn't mean you alone aren't strong enough. And yet, there are times when it takes a greater strength to even ask for help. But you, Marinette, are so full of life and love that it spills over into everything you do and everyone you know. Don't you think Adrien notices? You'd have to be a blind idiot not to. Not that he couldn't rightly be accused of that for not noticing Marinette's feelings for him years ago. And it was this other guy competing for his angel's golden heart. He knew he was just a silly, jealous kitty, but he couldn't help but hold her that much closer. I know he sees me, but it has only ever been as friends before. You've no idea how many times he's friend-zoned me without even knowing it. He winced at that. Ouch. He owed her so many apologies, didn't he? But now it's like he's finding excuses to be close to me, you know? I know he is trying to figure out what he wants, that it's separate from his father's plans for him. But I think he just wanted time with friends who wanted him to be himself. Does that sound conceited? I mean, there is that, but he also a genuine sweetheart who really cares about people. He sniffled and buried her face in his shoulder. What do I do, Cat? I'm such a mess right now. He thought for a long moment, content to hold her as long as she would let him. Could he encourage her to make her feelings known to him as Adrien? Or would that be abusing her friendship for personal gain? If he did, and she ever found out he was Cat, would she hate him for misleading her? No. As much as he would like to urge her into his own arms, he couldn't do that to her. He had been manipulated and scheduled his entire life, everything regimented and arranged to the point where he was struggling to figure out who he really was and what he truly wanted. As much as he wanted her to love him, more than anything else, he wanted to feel free. Free to live, free to love, free to choose, even if she didn't choose him. There isn't much I can tell you on the love front except to follow your heart wherever it leads, and don't be afraid to take risks, he said carefully, stroking her hair and breathing in her sweet scent. Who knows if he would ever get to hold her like this again. Anything is worth having if you fight for. Fight for what is right and what makes you happy, princess. If you do, then I have no doubt things will work out for you, even if it broke his heart. He had started off being her friend before they had grown closer. He could step back into that role if she needed him. Oh, well, all those years modeling would be worth it if he could smile and cheer her on in what made her shine with love, even if he did it to hide the pain. Really? Her voice was so soft and hopeful that it brought a lump to his throat. Yeah. He shifted away from her, not trusting himself to remember who he was right then, and then her curled in his arms to forget. He grabbed her shoulders and said, "How about I step in and help until Adrien gets back? I know I can't take his place, but..." "Oh, Kitty! Thank you so much!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his neck in delight. "So much for his restraint." He relaxed into her arms, struggling to suppress the purr that desperately wanted to escape his chest. She was so warm and sweet, and a touch against the strip of skin above the neck of his suit was like fire and ice combined. "Anything for you, Marinette." Then, as if she was quickly aware of just how close they were in such moment, she pulled away quickly, with her nervous smile fully in place. Cat ruffled the hair on the back of his head. Have you considered an auction? For the fundraiser, I mean." "Not really. I don't exactly have much to auction off that would bring in enough money to make it worthwhile." But that's the beauty of it," he said, his smile widening at being able to help so soon. "You get some local businesses and groups to donate items or services. You make such beautiful designs, Marinette. I'm sure one of your biggest designs would go for a high price. I know your friend Alia runs the Ladybug. Maybe she could help. Her boyfriend too, he's a DJ, isn't he?" "Yeah," she said, her face brightening with surprise. "Nathaniel could do sketches for people, and my mum could auction off some of her ink brush paintings, and Papa could auction off a certificate for a cake." "There's my princess," he said, smiling at her proudly. "All you needed was a little boost, and you're ready to take on the world." The smile she gave was enough to send his heart racing and for the insides to melt. Thanks to Kitty. "You would have figured out something without my help, but now that I'm here, let's get this auction idea off the ground, huh?" Adrien had got to school early that morning, hoping to catch Marinette first thing, but it was one of those days she skidded into class just as Miss Bustier called her name. It was a busy morning, with classes running late and other interruptions, so it wasn't until lunch that he had a chance to catch up with her. Marinette was sitting at a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, eating absent-mindedly and writing frantically in a notebook. She was in her own little world, but from that little frown on her face that crinkled her adorable nose, it wasn't a new design she was working on. Well, he needed to seize the opportunity to talk to her, even if it was just seeing her was making his heart race. "Hey, Marinette," he called, rushing over to her. "I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for what happened the other day. I hated that my father just jerked my chain like that. I guess I really let you down." He could feel his hand creeping up to rub the back of his neck in embarrassment, but he was startled by Marinette leaping to her feet. Her eyes were wide, cheeks pink, and she nearly knocked her lunch tray over in her haste. On instinct, he reached out to steady her, and she jumped against his chest, and his heart did an uptick as her blush darkened. "You didn't let me down, Adrien," she exclaimed, her eyes determined. She threw her arms around him in a hug. "I know how you always want your father's approval, but you aren't to blame for his actions. Never. I was worried that I'd gotten you into so much trouble. I thought he was going to pull you from school again." "She loves me," he thought fondly, marveling at the secret he had shared with Cat. She loves me for a long time. Seen me at my lowest and still cares. Oh, Marinette, if only I had known. Had the courage to act on my own feelings sooner. "If I'm not to blame, you certainly aren't either, little angel," he murmured, enjoying the warmth of her in his arms and the cool silkiness of her. He murmured, enjoying the warmth of her in his arms and the cool silkiness of her hair brushing against his bare hands. She squeaked in surprise at the endearment. She pulled away, blushing furiously as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I hope you don't mind, but I was talking to a friend the other day. He suggested an auction and helped me come up with some great ideas for how to get the community involved. He was great. He grinned wildly, thrilling at her unknowing compliment. Sounds fantastic, Marinette. How can I help? Her eyes darkened with worry. Adrien, are you sure I don't... My father is not going to stop me anymore, Marinette. I want to do it. I want to do something meaningful with my life. Not just pose for pictures or support something I don't believe in just because my father's name is attached to it. I want to help people. I have loved spending this time with you. You have taught me so much, and I want to stand by your side and see you through, he said tentatively, cupping her jaw to caress her cheek with his thumb. Your approval means so much more. Those sky blue eyes, so recently stormy, sparkled like stars, and those perfect rosebud lips were parted in surprise. Adrien, Was she gonna ask him out? Oh, how he hoped she would. He wanted nothing more than just to pull her into his arms and never let her go, to revel in her hands, in his, to finally have a kiss that could remember with his wonderful girl who managed the impossible without a Miraculous. Marinette hadn't just replaced Ladybug in his heart, he had completely eclipsed her. Whatever you need, Marinette, he murmured, his fingers itching to slide into her hair and pull her into a kiss, but resisted. Would you sit and have lunch with me? He smiled, a sigh hidden behind his lips. She was nervous around him again. She only did that because she cared about him. His heart glowed. It was a start. I would love that. You can tell me what you've come up with for the auction. I'm sure it's amazing. So they sat down, side by side, and pored over Marinette's notebook. She filled him in on what happened at the bakery event once he left, and then showed him how much more she had added to the original notes. That Adrien doubted whether she had slept much over the weekend. She talked adamantly about designing the gift certificates for the bakery auction item, her mother's excitement of painting something special for the event, and how she was finishing up a gown she had been working on with eye to putting it up as well. I was wondering if I should put up something for men too, perhaps an embroidered vest. What do you think? I think it sounds great, Marinette. I'd bid on it. Everything you make is incredible, but make sure not to spread yourself too thin. Make sure you aren't the only one managing things. Let me help. Well, am I missing something important? She asked, her pencil tapping to her lips absent-mindedly, and he swallowed hard. How could this girl tease him without meaning to? Have you considered asking Jared Stone for help? I know he only wants you to design for him now. Maybe he would be willing to help. Maybe donate something that he signed? I can ask Mayor Bourgeois if he could donate an all-expenses-paid night at the Grand Paris Hotel. She frowned at that. Wouldn't he make a fuss? I mean, he is the one wanting to tear it down and build apartments. Adrien shook his head. To be honest, I doubt he's even heard about this. Most likely, he was the city planning committee that arranged this, and it was just another file that pressed through the mayor's office. I can pull a few strings and let them know it is in his best interest to help out. If we save the hall, he comes out looking civic-minded. If we fail, he supports progress. Either way, he comes out looking good. He'll probably agree just to hedge his bets. But why would the mayor play both sides like that? It doesn't make sense. That's politics for you, girl. It's not supposed to. Alia's voice came from behind them, her eyes flashing knowingly behind her glasses as she took in the pair of them sitting so close to each other on the bench. But what have I interrupted? Planning to take on City Hall, sunshine? Adrien snorted. Not in that sense. I'm trying to escape the limelight, after all. However, Marinette and I are working on planning an auction to help save the community centre her granddad goes to a lot. Why does it need saving? Alia asked, moving around to the other side of the table to sit down. Marinette sighed in disgust, taking reasons off on her delicate fingers. The usual things, it is run down. They say if the problems aren't fixed, the building will be knocked down, but there isn't grants and funding to help support old buildings like this one, and they say it isn't safe, and the city should clean up the community, building more apartments to elevate the housing crisis, more tax revenues from boom of new business. The truth is, the community needs this hall. It's the center of it, really. Adrien nodded. There is this after school and weekend program there for the local kids. All ages can get together in a safe place, play games, get homework help, just be kids. He couldn't help but think of little Emmy. There are so many parents struggling to make ends meet or stay on top of stuff for their families, and the place that they can go for help are getting fewer and farther between. We fed how many people at the soup kitchen on the other Saturday, Marinette? 60? 70? She looked sad but nodded. The community elders use it for meetings and catching up with friends. They mentor the kids there. They just help each other. It is one of the few places I know where people help just for the sake of helping. Even Granddad goes in twice a week to bake bread for the soup kitchen and to teach simple baking to some kids. Everyone is a volunteer and they all work really hard. But if the community hall goes... She slumped in her seat and Adrien couldn't resist putting an arm around her in comfort. The neighborhood, the community will go with it, and there will be a lot more Kumas. These people are my friends, and I have to find a way to save their home. A fist pounded on the table, sending trays clattered and making them jump. Right. How can I help? I can get word out on the lady blog. Maybe even get the heroes themselves to weigh in on the community involvement, helping in the battle against Monarch. She seemed to eye Marinette for a moment before continuing. Maybe get the station involved too? Drop a bug in the editor's ear? It would be a great human interest piece. Hold the phone. We need to get Nino in this. Hey, babe, come here a sec. Nino soon joined them, and after a quick exploration, he's eager to join in. I can ask at the club if they're willing to donate something for the auction. I will offer my services as a DJ if you think that will help. I'm sure it will, bro, Adrien said with a grin. He glanced at Marinette and smiled. She was jotting down ideas, her smile hopeful and radiant. So, how are you gonna help, dude? Going to get your old man to auction off a Gable original? I would suggest he offered up his sense of humor, but it isn't worth peanuts. Adrien let out a low chuckle. No, my father has already grounded me over helping with this. It doesn't speak well of the aggressive image to be seen with such people. Adrien made annoyed air quotes and rolled his eyes. Just helping out the other day got me grounded. No way is he gonna agree to give away one of his precious designs. Well, sunshine, you could always offer yourself up for a date instead. No! Both him and Marinette exclaimed at the same time. They both looked at each other in surprise. One blush suddenly split across two faces. Marinette hurriedly turned to shoot a dark look at Alia. Adrien is not an object. It is bad enough his father treats him like that, but his friends should think better of him. Alia reached across the table and patted her friend's hand. Calm down, Em. I didn't mean it that way. I was just thinking out loud, that's all. It wouldn't be the first time a celebrity has gone on the auction block for charity. Well, I appreciate the idea, Alia. I don't want my name to be involved if we can avoid it. I am doing this because I want to help these people. I want to help and support Marinette, but I am also doing this for myself. I need to show my father that I am my own man, and he can't ignore me for years and then expect me to dance to his tune forever. All three stared at him, Alia and Nino, and their mouths slightly ajar, but Marinette, when he had the nerve to glance over at her, was beaming with pride. She was proud of him. It made him feel like he could do anything. Wait, dude! Is this the secret mission? Nino tried to say in a not so subtle way. The one you needed the disguise for? Yeah, thanks for that, Nino. Marinette butted in. I really needed that laugh. Excuse me? He failed to hide the smile and the laughter from his voice, but leaned in a little closer, being a tad playful now. Okay, side note, but this secret mission? Disguise. I'm sensing a failed attempt and I demand photos. But regarding the rest, what else can we do to save this community? Aside from sticking it to Adrien's dad. Nino leaned in to whisper something in her ear. In a Mr. Banana hoodie and a mustache? Now I definitely need photos. The four went back to class, all talking over each other as they bounced ideas, everything from practical to the ridiculous. It was a lot of fun, and several of their classmates picked up their excited vibes and joined the group. Jheqia offered to auction off an extreme makeup tutorial and promised to talk with Luca about arranging for Kitty section to offer a signed poster. Nathaniel was eager to help and offered to bring in some of his larger scale hero sketches so Marinette could pick out which one she thought would be worth bidding on. Soon the whole class was involved. Max offering his technical expertise, Kim insisting on auctioning off his services as a personal trainer with mixed responses. Rose says she could give singing lessons, and Ivan and Mylene promised to come and help in the soup kitchen and work concessions in the spare time. When Miss Bustier came back after the break to find them all discussing how they could help further, she said she would gladly sign off on any projects related to the effort as a community credits towards university applications, and she would discuss further efforts with Mr. Damocles that very afternoon. Adrien was over the moon. Not only were they getting lots of good ideas and helping, but Marinette was her beautiful, happy self and now had the perfect excuse to continue helping. After all, if it was for looking his aggress best on the university application and set school community project, which meant his father couldn't refuse to let him participate without looking bad. The class really rallied for the cause. Ali's mom agreed to auction off some cooking classes, The club Nino worked at offered to auction off a night for a private event. Kim somehow got the swim and track team to get pledges for how many laps or miles travelled, and the girls handed out so many flyers there wasn't a street corner or a shop window in the whole of the city centre that didn't have one proclaiming the date and time of the auction. Ivan and Mylene worked wonders, showing up at the community hall with a dozen volunteers to help clean and repair anything that needed it. Even the children at the centre joined in, drawing pictures and painting posters, though little Emmy refused to let anyone see what she was drawing. After several hours of very intense work, the tip of her little pink tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth, she came over and tugged on his sleeve. "Hey, Emmy," he said, getting down on her level, ruffling her curls. "For you," she said carefully, handing him a piece of paper. He smiled as he unfolded it, only for a lump to form in his throat. It was a drawing of Emmy, herself with him on one side, with Marinette and Cat Noir on the other, with Ladybug. He couldn't stop the tears welling up in his eyes. "I made sad?" she asked, her face pulled together in a frown and her bottom lip trembled. "I'm sorry." "Oh, no, little princess," he said thickly, swallowing back the swell of gratitude and love for this precious girl. "I'm not sad. Really, I'm not." The little girl looked confused and her eyes were welled up too. But Marinette knelt down next to them. "It's okay, Emmy. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy too. He really loves your picture. It makes him happy." Adrien could only nod. Those green eyes smiled back at him. Throwing her chubby arms around him, she gave him a hug. "Good kitty too," she said, nuzzling her face against his shoulder like a kitten. He glanced over at Marinette questioningly, but she just smiled and nodded. Adrien wrapped his arms around the little girl. "Thank you, Emmy. I love it." She sighed happily and pulled away to draw some more. He stood once more to find Marinette giving him the softest of looks. He blushed and rubbed the back of his neck. "What?" "Nothing. It's just..." She blushed herself and looked away, fiddling with the ends of her ponytail. "You're going to be a great dad someday." He blinked, taken back by how they had both been thinking about a future, but there was no way she could know that. In his daydreams, he wanted that future to be with her. For there to be little ones with her eyes and his hair. For there to be days full of love and laughter, crayon drawings and hugs. The fact that she thought he would be a good father was a loving earthquake that shook him to his foundations, tearing away the last of the walls he'd been keeping between them. He wrapped her in a tight embrace. "Thank you, Marinette," he murmured into her hair. "That means the world to me." She gave a tiny squeak that ended in a sigh as she all too briefly hugged him back. Then she pulled away, her cheeks dark with roses. "Come on, we need to meet with Grandad and the other elders to finish finalizing plans for the weekend." Tentatively, she held out her hand to him, biting her lip nervously, but her eyes were hopeful. His heart wanting to fly free from his chest, Adrien quickly took her hand and entwined her fingers together. Neither had to say a word, but the warmth of her hand in his said it all. "For the record," yelled Cat Noir, clenching and unclenching his claws around the steering wheel, "this is my least favourite Akuma ever." "What's the matter, Cat? I thought you liked playing games," Ladybug called over the noises of a dozen station wagons, all filled with screaming babies deadlocked in a traffic jam. The twirling her lucky charm, an oversized pair of fuzzy dice, around her fingers and glaring at the direction of Game Master. The way she worked her jaw told him she was grinding her teeth in frustration. This was taking way too long.
Says the one not stuck in the car, he yelled back, watching as she leaped from the top of one car to the next. I have somewhere important to be. You're not the only one, kitty cat, she called, but then her voice was lost in the noise. Cat groaned and covered his cat ears. He knew for a fact that this was not what Marinette had meant when she thought he would be a good dad. The station wagon smelled awful. There were 6 babies in car seats in the back, along with an enormous dog, all howling at the top of their lungs. But the worst part was the oblivious Marinette copy in the passenger seat next to him. She didn't say much. She just kept looking at him with adoring but vacant eyes, nodding in placid agreement to everything he said. That, more than anything, was what made him hate this Akuma. The way she never seemed to really see him, and the near boneless nodding of her head gave him the creeps and left him feeling slightly sick. Suddenly, Ladybug landed roughly on top of his car hood. Cat, drive to the right and ram his feet. I'll take care of the spinner. Got it. Babying the gas, he pushed his way through the snarled mess of game traffic and hit the sidewalk. Suddenly free of the press of cars, he gunned it, aiming straight for the giant red sneaker worn by the Akuma. Removing his seatbelt, he launched himself through the car window at the last possible second as the vehicle broke apart. Game Master let out a cry, and his hands were now tangled in a cord of fuzzy dice. Ladybug sent her yo-yo flying and knocked the game spinner out of his hand. Cat sprinted towards the object, snagged it into the side. He snapped the spinner and the Akuma was quickly purified. Ladybug let out a relieved sigh as her little ladybug swept through the city, dispelling the remnants of the giant game board. Of course, it still left a snarled mess of traffic as confused motorists tried to get their cars turned in the direction once more. Pound it, she said, offering her fist wistfully. He tapped his fist to her, looking worried. Hey, LB, is everything okay? She shrugged. Yeah, it's just, I heard something important this morning and now I'm afraid it won't happen. You know how the city gets after an Akuma. Yeah, I was going to help out at that community hall fundraiser. You know the one they're advertising all over the place? She nodded. Was that a hint of pink edging out from under her mask? That's very kind of you, Kitty. I just hope it works out. Well, in that case, LB, can I ask a one-off favor? Cat gave her the big eyes and hand pressed together in a please. Ladybug chuckled. What? Mind helping me direct some people towards the community hall? Help encourage a crowd and notify everyone that it's still happening? I mean, if we say use our fame just this once, trust me, it's for a good cause. Cat locked his eyes on hers and saw a soft twinkle in the response. Yeah, I think we could. Just this once. Give me 5. Okay, 2 minutes to recharge Tiki. And you start, and I'll join. Sounds like a plan, LB. Thanks. Cat beamed, pulling out his baton. I'll head this way. He gestured towards the direction of the hall before leaping across the roof. Cat was a couple of blocks away from the hall as the day's public drifted back down the street or into their homes. Ladies and gentlemen, the auction is about to start. Please make your way back towards the community hall. The sound of his voice grabbed a few people's interest, but not enough. People of Paris, the event of the year is about to start. Don't miss out and join Cat Noir and Ladybug. Follow us to the auction over at the community hall. Ladybug's voice boomed out of a red and black spotted megaphone, casting a spell over the public, her voice carrying across the nearby streets and beyond. She waved her hands in the air, gesturing to the crowd to follow like the Pied Piper. Everyone, follow us! Cat trumpeted, sprinting towards LB.
What is this? Looks like even fate is on your side today, Cat. She gave him a smirk. We are all in this together, to support one another. Maybe it was a sign he could try his luck later, making up his mind that he would confess his feelings to Marinette, no matter the cost. At the end of the day, she had said to Cat she loved him. Yes, torn over this other boy too, wondering which one of them was Buttercup. Ugh, never mind. At the end of the day, how was she meant to pick if she didn't know he felt the same? Maybe tipping the odds in his favor, if he is a little lucky today. The street in front of the community hall had been roped off for the auction and the block party afterwards. Red, white and blue streamers and balloons were wrapped up every lamppost and hung in every doorway. A sea of folding chairs bought from all over the city filled the roadside in front of the hall, facing a temporary platform where the auction was taking place. Rose stood to one side, filling in the gold meter as each lot went up. Cat stood on the podium, a grin plastered to his face. He was having the time of his life. Ladybug had slipped out after a few minutes, but the auctioneer was more than willing to let the Black Cat of Paris do a few special items. These next two items are the highlight of the auction today and were donated by the amazing Marinette Dupang Chang of Cherry Blossom Designs. The first is this lovely black silk men's formal vest. It is hand embroidered in silver with vines and leaves. Ivan and Kim carried the mannequin out to the front, holding it up for all to see. Turn it around for the good people, guys. Thanks. Now, this item has a standing bid of €1,000, courtesy of Adrienette. The bidding begins there. I have received word that Adrien will top any offer. Any takers? He smirked around at the people in the first few rows and held his hand to the side of his mouth like he was sharing a secret, despite the fact that he was speaking into a microphone. Sounds like a fair price for such a beautiful craftsmanship, though I can't help but wonder if Model Boy isn't smitten with the designer too. What do you think? He winked and set a puzzle of girls squealing only for them to be drowned out by shrieks from backstage. He chuckled, knowing it had to be Marinette, imagining her eyes sparkling with indignation and her cheeks burning scarlet. But when no one topped the bid and Adrien won the best vest, even Cat was surprised when the curtain opened on Marinette's other auction item. His jaw dropped and the microphone fell from his loosened grip as Marinette herself stepped out onto the platform. She had mentioned a gown that had almost finished but had questioned whether she had time to complete it before the auction. She had. Her torso was wrapped in a deep sapphire blue chiffon, forming a sweetheart neckline, and gathered at the waist with a glittering white butterfly like a purified akuma. The skirt flared out in the misty blue clouds of glittering soft fabric that faded from sapphire to corallium to bluebell to lavender to the blue of dusk after the sun had hidden itself away. Her graceful arms were adorned with nothing but white satin evening gloves, her eyes a smoky blue, and her hair pulled into a braid bun at the back of her neck. The crowd leapt to their feet, cheering and whistling in appreciation of the dress, but Cat nearly fell at her feet. His knees were weak at the sight of Marinette wrapped in a misty atmosphere of a gown, her cheeks pink and sparkling like downcast nervousness, peering at him through her dark lashes. He convulsively swallowed. His cheeks were burning at the sight of her, then managed to pull some Cat Noir swagger out of the mess that was Adrien, and made an elaborate bow. The crowd loved it, and he extended one clawed hand to her as the auctioneer smoothly took over. Marinette looked down at him softly, her cheeks darkening with roses and teeth pulling nervously at the corner of her lip. He winked at her and smiled.
"We have to sell it, don't we?" he murmured for her ears alone, wriggling his eyebrows at her.
Her lips twitched at the corners and her slender fingers slipped into his like they belonged there. Daring, Kat spun her around as if in a dance, ending in a cuddle hold, and him in front of her in his arms. The audience was going crazy. The auctioneer was busy keeping track of all the offers, but it didn't matter to him. Marinette's head turned over her shoulder to look up at him, placing his lips right to her ear.
"Now everybody sees the princess I do," he breathed, and felt her tremble at his words.
The friend? The one I started to see differently, she breathed, her face flushed and hot next to his. Is you. His eyes widened, and a purr started and stopped several times in his throat.
"She loved all of him. The goofy puns, Kat's cockiness that covered the well of insecurities, and the overbearing father, the crazy schedule, the loneliness, how much he struggled just to figure out what he wanted out of life. The fact that he had loved Ladybug for so long and probably never saw Marinette that way. She had found the courage to tell him how she felt. Could he do any less? "Thank you, my princess," he whispered past the lump in his throat.
"I just thought you should know, even though
you don't see me that way."
The words echoed loudly in his head, edged with a guilt, but bright with hope. Ladybug was right. Luck was with him today. He could tell Marinette as soon as he could, but for now, Kat spun her out and away from him, bringing her fingertips to his lips.
"Sold!"
The hammer came down with a loud crack, breaking the moment between them. The auctioneer called out to the cheering crowd,
"Sold to Audrey Boutoir for 10,000 euros.
Everyone went crazy. Programs were thrown into the air. Rose was ecstatically filled with the rest of the gold meter with marker in each hand. He turned back to Marinette, his smile so wide his cheeks hurt. The smile was full of gratitude and something more. With a grace that belied her clumsy nature, she swept into a deep curtsy while still holding his hand. He raised her up and let her go, giving her a little bow and a smile. He stepped away, his chest aching with longing as her fingers slipped from his. He gave a mock salute to the crowd, pulled out his baton and launched himself over the community hall just far enough to de-transform and sneak back in as his civilian. Adrien was gathering up the garbage from the trash cans scattered around the area. His father would disapprove in his only son for stooping to menial labor, but it felt good to help, set the street back to rights after a long day. Was this how Ladybug felt when her Ladybug swept through and restored everything? It was certainly slower, but knowing that he was doing his part, that his hands and thoughts and hard work had helped achieve something as important as saving the community hall for Roland and Pablo and Emmy, left him feeling proud of himself. Proud of being himself, being Adrien for the first time in as long as he could remember. And Marinette loves all of me, he thought, mind wandering back to how beautiful she had looked in her gown, the design of which she named Bluebell, but had shown the princess inside for all to see, and he never felt prouder or more in love with her. Adrien? He turned to see her, leaning her chin on a brush broom, and watched him with a soft smile on her face. She had long since changed out of the princess gown and back into a pink shirt and dungarees, but she would always look like a princess to him. "I think that's the last of the trash," he said, tying up the last bag and dropping it into the dumpster, his gloves following after it. "You need any help?" She shook her head. "I'm finished too. I just wanted to thank you. If it wasn't for you, we never would have gotten this far." Her bottom lip rolled between her teeth. Her eyes were cast down, and she twiddled the broom with her fingers, a sure sign that she was nervous. "You risked a lot to help save this place, this community, to help me. You'll never know how much that means to me. You could have ruined things with your father over this. It was very brave of you." Her words warmed his heart, and he found himself holding his breath. Her eyes locked him in a spellbound hold. She laid a hand on his arm. "I just wanted to say that whatever you decide you want to do with your life, I know you'll be amazing, Adrien. You don't need to worry about being trapped in your father's shadow. You have always been the kindest, sweetest, bravest person I know. You give yourself to your friends and even to strangers all the time. You are more patient with people than anyone else I know, even when they don't deserve it. And you have the most gentle, generous heart in the world. Your father may have crafted your image, but the person who we care about, that is all you." She looked down and her cheeks burned scarlet. Her voice lowered in a near whisper, so he had to lean in to hear her. "I could take or leave Agrest, but I don't ever want to lose you, Adrien." His heart pounded madly against his ribs. Adrien took the single step that separated them. He took the broom from her hand and leant it up against the wall beside them so he could take her in his arms. She had done so much for him, for their friends, for the community. Her heart was too big for her body, spilling love and friendship like water from her watering can, so that everyone around could grow as they needed to. He could grow with her. She could help him fly. "Marinette," he murmured, the hand with his Miraculous reaching up to caress her cheeks, his nerves singing when she leaned in to his touch. "I don't ever want to lose you either, but that means I have to take a risk now. I know we've been friends for years, and I can't tell you how special you have been to me all this time. You have always been there for me, and I think I may have been taking you for granted. I've been keeping you as my friend because I was afraid to lose one of my strongest, most supportive friends. One of my only two who have ever really fought for me. But you showed me that I can be more than a brand or a face. I know I'm not worthy to even ask this, but I know that I can't move forward, become the man I want to be, without having tried. So I'm going to shoot my shot," he said, taking a deep breath before plunging on. "I have liked you for a really long time, Marinette. Would you be willing to consider going out with me?" Her eyes crept up to cover her mouth, but her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. With a little sob, she wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face firmly against his hoodie. She mumbled something into the fabric, but he couldn't hear it. Adrien chuckled softly and held her close, breathing in her scent of vanilla and cinnamon. "What was that, Marinette?" She pulled away just far enough to peer up at him. "Adrien, I liked you since the day you gave me your umbrella. I would love to go out with you. He tipped her chin up, his fingers drifting to brush aside the tendrils of hair that had come free from her bun. It was cool and silky against his skin, and the warmth of her blush sent a thrill of anticipation through him. Then, can I kiss you? She rolled up on her toes, meeting him halfway as he tilted his head down to capture her lips. It was sweet and gentle, drowning him in her scent, the taste of strawberry lip balm and the warmth of her hands as they rested on his shoulder, adding to the heat that burned his neck, his ears, and pulled in his stomach like it just swallowed a pitcher of hot chocolate. The knot of anxiety he had carried in his chest for as long as he could remember, the one caused by his fear of never being enough, of being unloved and unwanted, loosened, sending his mind and heart reeling. Pulling away just far enough to breathe, he sighed in contentment, pressing his forehead to hers. "Wow," he whispered. "I didn't know kisses were like that." She blushed darkly once more, but she wore that little smirk that made his heart do somersaults. A tentative finger pulled down on the bottom lip, making his face tingle with desire to kiss her again. "Maybe 'cause I'm with you?" she murmured, making him swallow hard with the realization that she felt the same way, as her lips crashed back into his again with a deep sense of longing. "Oh, she's going to ruin me," he thought giddily. Then, thinking better of it, "I think she already has." And he didn't mind it at all. "Hey, lovebirds, come inside," Paolo called out from the doorway. "Your papa made a cake to celebrate our success." "Sì, innamorato, baciare! Ah, kissing comes later, see?" "Yes," they both called back, then looked at each other with twin grins and blushing. Laughing, he took Marinette's hand in his and wove their fingers together. "Shall we go, my little angel?" She nodded, her eyes sparkling like stars. As they walked up the steps together, Adrien felt a sense of peace wash over him. He may not have figured out the details of what he wanted to do with his life yet. He hadn't solved the problems with his father, but he did know that he wanted to be by her side. He was going to date Marinette. He would fight to become worthy of her, and someday, if she was willing, he would ask her to let him stand by her for the rest of their lives. But for now, with their fingers entwined, her steps matching his, and the prospect of cake and more kisses later, Adrien couldn't afford to wait a little while longer. After all, they were all in this together. After all, he loved her. And love is patient. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this epic one shot. It's like one of those epic movies that you watch. We just couldn't stop writing it, me and Jheqia. So I hope you really, really enjoyed it, and thank you very much if you have donated during this fundraiser, or if you just simply let all the ads run or anything like that. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for pressing the like button, showing some love to everyone who has helped contribute. All the links will be listed down below. Make sure you comment as well. Share this out to everyone so that everyone can get involved, and the more views, the more ads played, the more money we can raise. And also make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on other stories and one shots if this is the first one you came across, or if it's one of many. welcome to the community, and thank you very much for all your love and support, and I will speak to you soon. And I am gonna rest because that was just epic. And I will speak to you soon. Bye.